Welcome to the Master Car Pro channel. Today we'll talk about the problems and weaknesses of Opel Astra. Astra is one of the few budget models which has a pretty good quality of the paintwork of the body. However, it wasn't without weak places, for example an LCP on the front edge of the hood and the roof thinner than on the same doors or lid of the trunk. Because of this, the specified elements are worse than moving mechanical effects. Many owners note that the fact that cars made in Poland and Russia, the quality of painting is worse than those of cars collected in other countries. With time, it can begin to swell. Body iron, the metal is well protected from corrosion, galvanized, but by virtue of age, certain details require special attention. First of all, under the onslaught of reagents, the lid of the trunk, the edges of the door, joints of the wings with bumpers and thresholds are surrendered for many times, begin to rust. Cups of racks under plastic plugs, loop doors after 150,000 kilometers of run, the driver's door sense noticeably returned to the previous position will not be as simple as it may seem. Z14 XEP 1.4 90 HP, the weakest engine in the Opel Astra H line, was far from the most reliable. The timing of this unit is driven by a single row metal chain, which according to the manufacturer doesn't require replacement on the continuation of the entire service life of the grade. But as practice has shown, on most copies the chain is stretched closer to 150,000 kilometers. Of the common disadvantages of the motor, it is worth highlighting the unreliability of the flap of the twin port system higher systems and extraneous some when engine operation, no elasticity, stroke increase flow fuel. Also quite often the EGR valve, especially if you constantly use poor quality fuel clutch. If the EGR faults, there's some problems with stability of idle speed flow. Another disaster of the engine is considered to be the oil leak through the oil pressure sensor and the valve covered gasket. From other troubles, it is worth highlighting a small oil pump, resource, thermostat, and an ECU control unit. The rest of the engine is land. The main thing is not to save on its maintenance. The resource of the aggregate is 350,000 kilometers. Z16 XER A16 XER 1.6 106 HP. This is the most common engine of Opel. Unlike the younger unit, the belt works here in the timing drive, which is recommended to change together with tensioners or rollers every 90,000 millage. However, there are often cases when the belt rushes consistent with a little more than 60,000 kilometers when the belt is cutting the valve. POMP seated by the same belt changes with each second belt replacement due to the fact that this engine doesn't have hydra commuters. Once in 100,000 kilometers, it is necessary to adjust the valve in the car operating on gas. This procedure should be held twice as often, every 500,000 kilometers. Weak engine places should include the unreliability of twin port system, a small resource of the ECU block, thermostat, ignition module, and rear engine support. Quite often the owners are numbered on the deterioration of the dynamics and an unstable idling. In most cases, the disease is solved by cleaning and subsequent plug of the exhaust gas recycling valve EGR with frequent and long-lasting trips on low revs. The valve's quickly produces a seam flare which doesn't allow them to close, and the exhaust mixture quickly kills the catalyst. Z18 XER 1.8 125 and 140 HP. This is a simple 16-valve unit on both shafts, of which the system of changing the phases of gas distribution is applied. The GDM drive is activated by a durable bait which exceeds 120,000 kilometers. The most common problem of the engine is an increased noise of work diesel location. The culprit of this ailment is often the failed electromagnetic valves of the phase regulator. To eliminate the illness, cleaning valves is required. If it doesn't help, the valve will have to be changed. In machines produced in 2004-2005, defective were established distributional shafts. Because of this, the camshaft position sensors were shut down and the camshafts themselves were declining over time. There are complaints and reliability of phase regulators on intake and graduation rates. When using poor quality lubrication, it is already necessary to replace them with 100,000 kilometers of mileage. A lot of trouble can be delivered, and the ventilation system of crankcase gases, the membrane is covered by cracks, which is why air drowsiness appear. Frequently, the owners of the car with such a motor are faced with such a nuisance. As a follow heat exchanger, the gasket replacement is required. Completes this bouquet. Frequent failures in the electrical part of the engine are unreliable ignition module, thermostat, and electronic engine controls units. The declared resource of 300,000 kilometers. In practice, it goes about 400,000 kilometers. Z20 LED 2.0, 170 and 200 HP. The 2-liter turbo engine was developed specifically for sports models, Opel OPC, and installed on such popular models as Astra and Zafira. The timing belt is installed with a prescribed replacement interval once every 600,000 kilometers. It is worth nothing that when the belt breaks in 100% of the piston of the valve band, like weaker motors, this engine sinks unstable idle, and oil leaks through all sorts of gaskets. Of the more significant trouble by the owners marked a short service life. Masonry caps they quickly dub because of what the engine begins to eat oil and strongly challenge. The problem is solved by replacing caps. Another common disadvantage is the unreliability of the exhaust manifold. Cracks appear on the housing symptoms, floating turnover, noise appears. You can temporarily solve the problem with welding, but it'll be more reliable to replace the problem detail. General boy cycle engines, in addition to the possible breakdowns described above, there are often troubles that appeared in independence from the selected motor. The most common is the flow of the coolant radiator. The throttle cooling tube is buffeted, discharges contact on the generator relay, stops the expansion tank, covered the rear crankshaft, gland flows. Diesel, despite its economy and good travelers, Opel Astra H with diesel engines wasn't widely distributed in the CIC. From the shortcomings of heavy fuel engines, it is worth nothing a higher service cost than that petrol accrues. The capriciousness of the fuel system, the short service life of the EGR valve to mated flywheel, and the sun filter, 120-150,000 kilometers. The engine Z13DTH has a thermostat, flowing timing change, and its tensioners. Don't forget about the sensitivity of the aggregate to the level of oil. If you have long to operate with car with a minimum level of oil, sooner or later it'll end the damage of valve rockers. The weak place of the Z17DTH engine is considered a turbine. Its resource often doesn't exceed 15 million kilometers. Another famous source of DVC is to flow the rubber seals of nozzly sleeves. The Z19DTH motor is not famous for the reliability of the exhaust manifold, can be deformed with strong heating. Also, the vortex intake manifold flaps are also considered mechanics. This gearbox is considered the most reliable. Two weak places here include unreliability of the rear seal, flowing a small resource of the bearing of the secondary shaft serves 70-90,000 kilometers, and lack of synchronizers. Rear transmission bat turns on upon late services. Difficulties may appear with the inclusion of the first 3 gears. On the car of the first years of release during operation, a crack could appear on the suture of the box. Good, the disease wasn't massacred. Clutch eye released bearing with a gentle handling about 130,000 kilometers is enjoyed. Automatic, the classic hydro-mechanical automatic is reliable, but it often brings the cooling system. Therefore, the installation of an additional radiator is extremely recommended. From the disadvantages of this CAT, it is worth noting the presence of jerks when starting and switching gear, feature of the machine. Over time, the cooling system, cooler and radiator begins to flow when coolant in the hydroconductors of the box. Likelihood of its complete failure is high. Robot. Pre-selective KP Easytronic is considered the least attractive option. In addition to the fact that during operation she annoys his slowness, she still needs good service. The box itself is reliable as it's made on the basis of the usual 5-speed manual transmission, but its electronic control system often fails. The switching unit of the switching is painfully tolerates work into severe frost, as well as a meeting with regains. And third, another disadvantage of the robot is considered a small clutch resource, no more than 100,000 kilometers, and the need for adaptation adjustment every 1,500,000 kilometers. Weak places of chassis, steering and brakes. Opel Astra H. On the Opel Astra H is applied classic for the car of this class of that time, have dependent suspension of McPherson rack rear torsion beam. Despite all simplicity of the design, it is not particularly reliable. The weak point of chassis are supporting bearings, which in our realities rust after a pair of years of operation. 60,000 kilometers cause. As a rule, the culprit is moisture, which accumulates under the plastic lid. Also quite quickly surrender rear shock absorbers after 80,000 kilometers, and closer to 15,000 kilometers spread the springs. Many owners, in order to extend the service life of the shock absorbers when replacing them, set reinforced springs a little less than 100,000 kilometers, serve ball supports and hub bearings, but the ABC sensors often begin to collect without caring, and 500,000 kilometers rotate contacts. Steering control. It applies a rush mechanism with an electro hydroxidant steering wheel. The rail is considered fatally problematic and can start to flow fairly early on mileage 100,000 kilometers. If the problem doesn't eliminate the entire known collapse over time, also are not famous for its reliability and tips of steering crash. In rare cases, this detail withstands without a backlash and knocking more than 30,000 kilometers. Torquemoose brake system reliable. The only thing that the owners are compiled is a fairly rapid wears of the brake pads on the front axle. Saloon and electronics. Opel Astra H. Despite the low cost of the car, the quality of finishing materials and their wear resistance doesn't cause any questions, no complaints, and to the quality of the assembly. But with the arrival of cold, crickets in the cabin still appear. But on the other part of the electronics, here is not so unequivocal. The biggest problem is not the best wiring quality, it disappears, breaks on bands, etc. A rather common phenomenon is considered to be the failure of the CIM front console module. If there's a problem, the steering wheel switches and part of the buttons on the center console are stopped. Over time, malfunctions appear in the work of the climatic system. The air recycling flap fails. Well, if you are the owner of this car, then please describe the problems that you had to face during the operation of the car. Perhaps it is your feedback that'll help viewers when choosing a car. That's it for today. Thanks everyone for attention. It isn't much work for you to subscribe to the channel. See you soon.